Hi guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. So this is going to be part 2 of my October wrap up. I encourage you to go watch part 1 if you would like to know some of my October reading stats and to find out the first batch of books that I read during the month of October. But I read 20 books during the month of October, and so that's why I felt the need to split this into 2 separate videos. So in that video, I went over what I read for Gilmoreathon and my Scythe Along read along group. In this video, I'm going to go over what I read for Spookathon and everything else that I read during the month of October. So let's get into this. All right, so for Spookathon, I was able to complete 4 of the 5 challenges. Technically, I've completed all 5 though, because I typically don't read thrillers. And so the one challenge that I did not complete, or the one book that was on my TBR that I did not complete, was the reading a book that you don't typically read. And really, any of these could fall into that category. So I consider that a win. But I did read 4 books for Spookathon. The first being The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. I don't understand the hype around this book. I'm just gonna throw that out there. As somebody who doesn't really read thrillers a lot, I was expecting this to scare the poop out of me because everybody loves this. Everybody's saying that this is like their favorite thriller of the year and it was so good and yada yada yada. I didn't get it. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was okay. It is all about this woman who shoots her husband in the face and then stops talking. And so she's apprehended by the police. They take her into custody and she won't speak at all. She just goes mute. And so you get it from her point of view and then also her therapist's point of view. So she ends up going into like a psychiatric facility and has a therapist, and you get his point of view and her point of view, and it's kind of like the backstory of what was going on leading up to it, but also like current. And it was good, I guess. I was really bored. I'm not even gonna lie. For like the first 75% of this book, it was so slow. I almost DNF'd this one because it was that slow. This might actually drop down to a 2-star because the more I think about it, the more I just did not care for it. So maybe it's just me because I don't read thrillers. I didn't get it. So like I said, 3 stars. I was not impressed. It was fine, but it was nothing to write home about, in my opinion. So that was the book that I chose to read for Read a Thriller. So that tells you anything. And then the book that I read for a spooky setting book is Small Spaces by Catherine Arden. This is a middle grade thriller that is set on a spooky farm in the woods. This book, okay, Silent Patient, I was like, whatever. This was not scary. The middle grade book creeped me out. What does that say about me? Whatever. This book, though, there is haunted scarecrows in this book. There was one point that I actually jumped. Like, I'm reading it and I'm like, jumped. This was so good. I read earlier this year The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden, and that book was so atmospheric. And this, just as atmospheric, but on a creepy level. This follows our main character, Ollie. She is going on a field trip with her friends to this farm, and she has come in possession of this old book, and it's kind of written in diary format. And when she gets to she's reading the book, and then when she gets to the farm, she realizes that a lot of the things going on at the farm are very similar to what's in the book. And is there any tie between the two, and what is going on? And it was so good. And yeah, I'm planning, there's a second one in this. I don't know if it's technically a series or just like companion books, but there's a second one that takes place over Christmas time, and I'm planning on reading that in November. So I'm excited, but kind of creeped out because the next one is like, it has to do with ghosts. So I don't know. I think it'll be good. This one, I gave 4 stars. I love this. It did exactly what I expected it to do and what I wanted from Spookathon. So that was a win for me. And then for the Read a Book with Red on the cover, I read Sing Unburied Sing by Jesmyn Ward. I buddy read this with Kara from Books and Jams, and this was a lot more literary than what I typically pick up. I ended up part of the way through the book switching to the audiobook, and I think that was a really smart decision for me. I really, really enjoyed the narrators of this book. Yeah, so what this is about, this follows three different characters. You have a boy, Jojo, who just turned 13. They're living in Mississippi, and he lives with his grandparents and his mom. His dad's in jail. His mom is not the best. She's a drug addict and just kind of disappears here and there. And so his dad's getting out of jail, and his mom decides that she's gonna take Jojo and his little sister, who's like 2 or 3 years old, up with her to get him, pick him up when he's released from jail. And so it's told from their two perspectives, and then it's also told from the perspective of a ghost of one of the former inmates of this jail. The jail's name was, it was a farm. I'm not gonna be able to remember. Oh, Parchman. The Parchman farm. It was a penitentiary in Mississippi. It might still be there. I don't really know, but it's been there for forever. And so it was just kind of the story of that farm and this ghost of one of the inmates there, and then Leonie, who is the mom, and Jojo, who's the kid. And like I said, this was a lot more literary, a lot slower pace. I'm really glad I switched over to the audiobook. I think that helped a lot as far as how I was able to get through it. It was very good, though. It was very, very beautiful. Jesmyn Ward has a way of writing just about all your senses and hearing and what you see and what you smell and what you taste. And that I loved in this book. Her descriptions of things were just amazing. Her writing was beautiful and very poignant, but ended up giving it 4 stars because it wasn't the type of book to where I just wanted to go and I wanted to read it and I wanted to devour it. It's not going to be a book that sticks with me, I don't think, like some other books do, but I'm really glad that I was able to read Jesmyn Ward. She's been an author that I've been wanting to read for a while, and I'm really glad that I read it with somebody so that I had somebody to talk through some of the things I wasn't quite understanding, or kind of get some impressions from what Krista was feeling when she was reading it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that was really good too, And so some of the things I didn't quite pick up on, and just be able to talk about those. And so yeah, I really enjoyed it. 4 stars, glad I read it. So that was Red on the Cover. And then the book that I read with a spooky word in the title was A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This book was my singular 5-star read of the month. It was beautiful. I read this in a day. It is illustrated. It's YA. It has these like illustrations throughout it though, so it reads fairly quickly. This is all about, here's another one. This is all about our main character, what's his name? Connor. And his mom is sick. He is constantly having these nightmares, and then one night this monster just shows up at his window and starts talking to him, and it is a lot. This book deals a lot with grief and the ability to let go when it's time to let go. This book hit me in the feels. This book, like thinking about it, is like getting me teary all over again, because this book was just so good. And as a parent, I felt for his mom so much in this, and having to parent a child. His parents are divorced, and so she was a single mom, and they lived in England, I think, and his dad lived in America and had kind of moved on and had a new family. And so it was just heartbreaking, just completely ripped my heart out, and it was fantastic. If you have not read this book, go read this book. This has been on my radar for quite a while. I probably should have gotten to this sooner than I did, and I'm so glad I finally got around to it. 5 stars, hands down. Love this book so much. All right. those were the books that I read for Spookathon. And then everything else on my list are books that I read after Spookathon was over. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is Boy Crazy Stacey. This is the 7th book in the Babysitter's Club graphic novel adaptation. It is by Gail Galligan and Anna Martin, because it's based off of her books. But this one, I had in a previous video talked about the first like 6 Babysitter's Club graphic novels, and how once Gail Galligan took over the illustrations, I was not a fan. And this one I think was way better than books 5 and 6. As far as the illustrations go, the content in this one is probably not appropriate for like 8 and 9-year-olds. It talks about boys a lot, obviously, because of the title. It talks about the desire to like have a boyfriend and crushes and what boys look like and your first kiss and all of that. Totally appropriate for like probably 6th, 7th, 8th graders. My kids are in 3rd and 4th grade, and they don't need to be thinking about that yet. As the mom, I'm pretending that they are not thinking about that yet. And if they are, I don't want to encourage them more by giving them books that make them think about that. So this is one that I probably won't be sharing with my kids quite yet. In due time, by all means, they can read it and have at it. But just kind of as a parental warning on that, I would say that. However, as an adult reading this, I loved it, and I thought that the content in it was really, really great. It follows the story where Stacey and Marianne are going on a beach vacation with Mallory and her family. And if you don't know Babysitter's Club, sorry, this is getting into Babysitter's Club lingo a little bit, but I don't know how else to explain it. But so 2 of the girls are going on a trip with a family, and they're going to be the babysitters for this beach family. And one of the girls has a crush on the lifeguard at the beach and pretty much decides to completely neglect her babysitting duties, so the other girl gets stuck doing everything. And so it talks about friendship and how that's not okay to like completely get infatuated with a boy and forget the rest of the world exists. And I really liked that aspect of the story, because I think that is a message that girls need to hear, that it is not okay to have a crush on somebody and let them rule your world. You still have obligations, you have responsibilities, and you got to keep your head on your shoulders. And so I really like that part of the story. So I ended up giving this one 4 stars. The illustrations were better. The storyline was great. 2 thumbs up. So that was that. After that, I listened to Fierce Kingdom by Jen Phillips. Ugh, this book. I have been wanting to read this. I first heard about this from Lindsay's Little Library. She had featured it in one of her Book List Thursday videos, and the premise of it sounds terrifying. It is about this mom who is at the zoo with her son, and they're getting ready to leave, and they hear gunshots, and so they run back into the zoo, and she tries, she has to hide and use her knowledge of the zoo in her favor to keep her and her very young son, son's like 4 or 5, safe and quiet and whatever, while this shooting is going on, which sounds absolutely terrifying. Except I wanted this to be more about the zoo and the animals at the zoo and what happens when the lions, things happen, and the elephants, and all of the zoo aspect was missing, and that's what I wanted, because that sounded so appealing to me. It's just like the animal nature side of it, and pretty much she goes and she hides in an empty animal enclosure with her son for over half the book. It's her and her son just sitting in this dark, empty animal enclosure. And I wanted so much more. I gave this 2 stars. I was really disappointed. I was really, really bored. I kept waiting for it to start and for things to pick up and for there to be a point. And it does get into the shooters and what their motives were and all that. And I did like that part of it because it explained it. But I don't know. It just wasn't what I was expecting. I went into it with different expectations and it fell flat for me. So 2 stars for that one. Then I listened to Sleeping Giants by Sylvain Neuval. This is one that was on my fall TBR. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook is a full cast. It is told in interview format. And so if you're going to read this, hands down, do the audiobook. It's worth it. Because yeah, I think reading this one, I probably would have gotten a little bit bored with it. It was good. It wasn't as good as I was hoping it was going to be, because I've heard so many people say that the audiobook is so great. And the audio production was great. The content was like 3 stars. So this is about a girl, what's her name? Rosie or something. Oh, Rose, who, she's 11 years old. She's riding her bike through a field and then just like falls into this hole and lands in this giant metallic hand, or metal hand. And it's like 20 feet long, you know, so it's a huge hand. And then she grows up to be a scientist, a physicist or whatever, and is looking into what this is and where it came from and why it's there. And you get into that. There's a lot of politics in this book, which I was not quite expecting. The end, totally, I want to read book 2. Like, this completely is a first book in a series, sets everything up. There's not a whole lot of action in this one, but it sets everything up for there to be something coming. So definitely looking forward to book number 2, but this one was just 3 stars. I'm hoping that the rest of it will be better, but I'm glad that I was able to check that off of my fall TBR. I also read Guts by Raina Telgemeier. This is her brand new graphic novel. It's a middle grade graphic novel, and it talks about her issues with anxiety. When she was in, I think it's 6th grade, she got sick one night, and then ever since then had a huge fear of throwing up and vomit, and started to suffer from pretty severe anxiety issues, and it projected onto like what she was eating, and she would refrain from eating because she didn't want to make herself sick, things like that. And so luckily she had parents who were very aware of what was going on and got her the help that she needed, and didn't just brush it off like, oh, you're just faking it, which I loved. This is definitely one that I'm 110% okay with my kids reading. I think it's really good for them to know that if you don't feel good, you need to tell somebody, and tell somebody who's going to listen to you. And so it was really, really great. But it was all about like her stomach issues and her anxiety issues and all of that. Really, really loved it. And once again, Raina Telgemeier drew off of her own life experiences, similar to Smile and Sisters. So like this one. Oh, 4 stars for this one. Then I finished Warrior Cats number 2, Fire and Ice. This is the second book that I read for my kids, the book club that I do with my kids, where we're reading through the Warrior series right now, me and my 8 and 9-year-old. I gave this one 3 stars. It's the second book in a series, so I can't really talk too much about it because there are tons of spoilers. But the Warrior series is about these clans of feral cats that live in a woods behind a timber mill. And that's the best way to explain it. And it's just kind of their adventure with clan experience and clan versus clan and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of violence, there's death in it, that sort of thing. So if you're not okay with that, skip this for middle grade. But I enjoyed it, 3 stars. I'm enjoying reading these with my kids though, and I like the experience of being able to share in something that they are completely obsessed with at this point. So yeah, 3 stars for that one. And then another graphic novel that I just finished today was The OK Witch by Emma Steinkellner. This is a graphic novel, middle grade graphic novel, about a girl who really likes all witchy things and then finds out she is a witch. And how does that affect her? And it's set in Massachusetts. And so kind of the town, the original founders were not fond of witches, and there was a whole like story in town about how they eradicated the witches from town. And so, you know, kind of how does that affect her? It was really cute. I really loved the illustrations in this. They were just, let me find a good page. I don't know. They were just fun, colorful, middle grade illustrations. It wasn't anything super fantastic, but it was a fun Halloween read. I really wanted to read this over like the Halloween time. Today is Halloween, and so I finished it today. Perfect Halloween read. Really glad that I read it. 3 stars though, as far as the storyline goes. I also was able to read Sheets, which I had to take back to the library. But this is another middle grade graphic novel that is about a girl who she lives above a laundromat. Her family runs the laundromat, and it's kind of told in 2 different perspectives. It's her and this ghost that lives in a ghost world. And it was okay. I only gave it 2 stars because I have seen it dealt a lot with mental health, and her dad is suffering from depression. Her mom died, and so her dad's suffering from depression. The laundromat is failing, and there's a guy in town that wants to buy the laundromat and like turn it into a yoga studio or something. And then this sheet that is a ghost ends up in the laundromat, and so they meet the sheet ghost and the main character meet and talk. And so it kind of gets into mental health a little bit. I don't know. The storyline itself, I just wasn't a huge fan of. And the topics that were discussed, I've seen handled better in other books. And so this wasn't my favorite middle grade graphic novel. It wasn't my favorite graphic novel. It wasn't my favorite middle grade. It just was not my favorite anything. I would skip this one, honestly. So I ended up only giving it 2 stars. So the last book that I picked up this month is Conspiracy of Blood and Smoke by Anne Blankman. This is the 2nd book in the Prisoner of Night and Fog duology. This series follows our main character Gretchen, who is a family friend of Hitler, and it takes place in between World War I and World War II. So in the time where Hitler is Chancellor of Germany, before World War II is starting. And her family was family friends with Hitler, and so she's a close personal acquaintance of him. And in the first book, she meets a Jewish journalist, and her father previously had been killed and was a martyr for Hitler's kind of stance on things. And the journalist tells her, the story that you think about your father is not what's true. And she's like, who you think you are, And so it's just kind of about their relationship and getting to know each other and digging into why her father died. This is the 2nd book and just kind of goes deeper into them trying to upset the apple cart in the National Socialist Party in Germany during that time. And this one was... I'm trying to wrap my head around how I felt about it because I enjoyed my reading experience. I enjoyed the action. This was very action-packed. I enjoyed all of that. However, the kids in here, this is YA, and so they're teenagers. Gretchen and the journalist, Daniel, are teenagers, and they don't act like it. They act like adults, and they're treated like adults by other people. And that I kind of had an issue with. And so for that reason, I gave this 3 stars instead of 4 stars. But I enjoyed the reading experience. And so that's where I'm kind of struggling with this one. I didn't like that they were treated as adults when they are clearly teenagers. And there were a lot of convenient plot points in this. Like, how many times can you escape out the back of a building without getting caught? More than once. And so, yeah, I don't know. This was 3 stars, but I love the topic. I love the author's notes in the end because the main characters are fictional, but a lot of the events and the other characters in the book are real, and they're based off of real characters. And you can tell that the author completely did her research and really delved into Germany during this time and the major characters in the National Socialist Party and their opposition and all of that. Winston Churchill's in this, and so it was really good. There were those couple of things that just really prevented me from rating this one any higher. So that is it. Those are all of the books that I read during October. So It was a lot. It was a lot of reading. I'm probably going to take a break for a day before I get into my insanely chaotic November TBR. I have Believeathon, Nonfiction November, and Buzzword Readathon all in November, and I have a slew of books that I want to read for all of the things, and I don't know. I need to take a break, I think, though. Otherwise, I'm going to get burnt out. Maybe I'll push through November and then burn out in December and not read anything in December. Who knows? But anyway, as always, if you've read any of these books or have comments about them, please leave all your comments down below. I love to, converse with you about the different books. And other than that, I hope that you enjoy this, and I hope that you stick around and subscribe. And until next time, see ya!